Hello, and welcome to Saving People, Queering Things, a Supernatural podcast. We were previously known as Driver Picks the Podcast, and the episode you're about to listen to was recorded under that name. Though our name has changed as of season 3, our show hasn't changed that much. Our structure and theme-based discussions are the same, and we're so glad you're here. Now, let's get on the road. Hello, and welcome to Driver Picks the Podcast, the show where we talk about ghosts, road trips, and free will through every episode of the TV series Supernatural. Today, we are discussing Season 1, Episode 14, Nightmare, through the theme of Zeal. I am Abigail, your host, and joining me today is Hannah, who has joined us a number of times before, and Alicia, who is joining us for the very first time today. So, Alicia, do you want to introduce yourself and maybe tell us briefly about your experiences with Supernatural?
Yes, of course. Okay, so I started watching Supernatural when I was like 15. My first season was season 7, which is a terrible season.
Oh, man.
Don't know how I kept going, but I was like, fuck it, I love it. Bring back that gay angel. And so, yeah, I just like fell in love. I got really into it. I started writing fanfic and went to a bunch of cons. Fun fact, I've met Kevin's actor. We had a whole conversation. It was great. Anyway, but yes, so I love Supernatural, even though sometimes it's a lot, but so am I. So who am I to judge?
Amazing. Yeah, I relate to a lot of that. So some similar story there.
Except I started, on ground zero. I was a purist and maybe approached those seasons with I appreciate the chronological.
You
order.
are not allowed to speak on this, Hannah. You have never seen the show properly until this very year.
Oh, you are a poser. Second of all, I started from season 1 because a girl that I had a crush on at the time, who was not my best friend, was really into Supernatural, and they were like, oh my god, season 7's coming up, we have to watch it. I was like, yeah, I also love Supernatural. Went home, binged watched Netflix, almost failed a class. I was like, fuck homework, we're watching this show. And then got to season 7 as it was airing, and then I made a whole Tumblr about it so that I could live blog it, and I live blog every season from season 7 to season 12 religiously.
That is wow, commitment. You are like experienced at this whole going through.
I'm not gonna lie, this is a dream come true for me. I have so many words about Supernatural and no one to listen to them anymore. So this is great.
I'm so excited. I mean, that's why we created this podcast, because I was also feeling that exact same thing. So I'm excited that there are still people that are now in our, mid-20s that are like, we watch Supernatural as young mostly young gay teenagers, and now we get to talk about Supernatural.
Yeah.
As
I love it.
Grown-ass adults. It's fun.
The brainworms never left.
They never left. They're
Never.
embedded.
Well, I'm going to do our series recap, our road so far, just to catch us up on where we are in the season if you haven't joined us in a while, or if you need a little refresher on what's going on prior to this episode. So this show, Supernatural Season 1, is about 2 boys, the roads of America, and one mission to find their father. So Mary Winchester died at the hands of a supernatural being, a demon, in 1981, and her husband John took his 2 sons and began a life of hunting the thing that killed her, as well as any other supernatural evil thing he came across, from vampires to angry spirits. But now it's 2005, and his youngest son, Sam, who is a Stanford student, has also lost the love of his life to the same monster, the demon that killed Mary. Sam, along with his older brother, Dean, have been spending this season searching for John for about 5 months, while John continues to send them increasingly cryptic messages and is actively dodging any real-life meeting with them. In episode 11, John called the boys and revealed that the monster they're hunting is a demon and that he's closing in on it, but that he wanted them to stay away and let him handle it. This prompted a blowout fight between Sam and Dean, but they reconciled when Dean was in danger later in that episode. Sam tells Dean that you and me, that's all that's left. And that's kind of where we're at this point. Despite a situation where Dean almost dies in episode 12, John continues to be nowhere to be found, and Sam and Dean are becoming more and more desperate to find him. And that brings us to this episode and to our 30-second recap. And before we do this 30-second recap, I am going to give a bit of a content warning. This episode, including the recap and our theme discussion, will inevitably include some discussions of child abuse and also of suicide. So just be warned that those are some content pieces from the episode. We will do our best to discuss them sensitively, but just be aware of that. This is something we've done every week. We do a basically 30-second recap. Each of us gets a chance, and you just in 30 seconds say whatever you think is important from the episode.
Okay, amazing.
It can be plot, theme, it can be whatever. Some of them have turned out really well. Some of them have been very bad. So
I love that.
There's
true.
Would anyone in particular like to start? Does anyone feel ready to start? Otherwise, I will get myself ready to start. I'm not going to make you start, Alicia.
I was like, oh yeah, I want to see the format before I jump into this.
Yeah, I always wing it, and I always act like I'm needing to think about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, Abigail knows this, but my brain just never works like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, let me think about this. Let me take a second.
And you have been, I think, consistently one of our better recappers.
Wow.
The bullshit is strong in me.
Amazing.
Okay, wait, what the fuck happened in this episode?
That's another problem. I'm like, in my head, I know what happened, but can I say what happened? Okay. But I feel like I have a good grasp on it.
All right.
So I can go whoever wants to go first.
All right, well, I'm going. All right,
okay.
Ready? I have the time.
You've got your own timer. Okay, Hannah, I am going to count you in for our recap. 3, 2, 1, go.
So Sam is awakened in the middle of the night with yet another vision, this time of someone dying of carbon monoxide poisoning within their car. He and Dean race through the night to try and save them. They're too late while they're there. This person's brother also dies. And they question the family, this mom and a kid who looks really clammy, really unusual. Turns out he's actually been killing his abusers, his dad, his uncle, and has the same powers, it seems, as Sam, as well as the same history. Dun dun.
Amazing.
See?
All right, I will go. Yeah, count me in. And I can go.
Okay, Alicia. 3, 2, 1, go.
All right, alternate title for this episode: Dean Winchester does not believe Sam once again. Sam wakes up, has a vision. It's like, hey, can we go save this guy? They don't do it in time because Dean's kind of like, They figure out, the kid's been murdering his entire family, kind of rightfully so. Dean, trying to be macho, tries to stop it. Sam has to come in using his awesome powers, stops it, and then Dean just kind of like, oh, well, that probably won't affect you.
Amazing.
All right, ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
So Sam and Dean had not the greatest childhood with John, but it turns out some people's childhoods was much worse. And in this episode, they go to a town where a kid who's also psychic and telekinetic has been killing the people who hurt him as a child. Sam and Dean are able to stop it, but unfortunately they're not able to save the kid who ends up killing himself. But they do find out that Sam also has telekinesis.
That was smooth. I liked that segue.
That was good. Yeah.
Yeah, you both threw in like narrative features.
Yeah. I'm so ready to discuss John Winchester.
All right. Yes. Okay, so it is now time for us to discuss this episode through our chosen theme. And this week our theme is Zeal. So I've taken a bunch of notes. You are free to use them or use your own or just talk about whatever. First thing I kind of wanted to just do, because Zeal is not as maybe common of a term as some of the other themes we've done this season, is kind of defining what is Zeal. So when I went on Google and went, what's Zeal? The definition that came up first was great energy or enthusiasm in pursuit of a cause or an objective. If you have other definitions, go for it. Yeah, thoughts on this episode?
What an episode. You know what? I have not watched season 1 in so long because I once Castiel appeared, I decided fuck seasons 1 through 3. I want the angel. But this was such a good episode, and I think was really one of the foundation episodes for, I guess, like, not only Sam like realizing something's like fuckity going on with himself, but also like Dean being like, holy shit, like Sam's a little weird in like a way that I don't think that he really internalized before.
Yeah.
That last of the episode was like, that was a good one.
They have a conversation about, is our family cursed? And
yeah.
And by the end of the episode, it's like, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I think what I really love about that, right, is I know in prior episodes we've sort of talked about this tension between Dean and Sam and pulling Sam back into the hunting world and building on the brothers' dynamic. And, you know, so you spend so much time luring the audience into the hunting world and then luring them into the Winchester brother bond. And this is the first time we're actually sort of connecting them back out to the larger lore, right? There have been hints about how they interact with the world. There have been hints building up to this. But this is the first time that, like you said, Dean is internalizing what Sam has been learning, and the first time that they like really interact with somebody outside of them who's experienced similar things. And it's like, hold up, we're hitting the point where the show is not only building on these brothers, but building on their connection to the world around them.
Yeah.
That's invigorating.
We start to realize their story is a lot bigger than just some supernatural being, you know, killed.
Right.
Yeah. Prior to this, we've kind of, and most of the monsters so far this season have been kind of one-offs. Often it's very circumstantial. Usually it's not like
monster of the week towards more of a substantive plot.
Yeah. And it's not like they're hunting for their dad, because like they know where their dad is. Their dad is a dick. So it's just kind of like, you know, now it's kind of like, what do we do here? Also, this was the first episode, I think, right, where it wasn't like, there wasn't actually a monster, right? This was the monster person, like, because I mean, he was still human. And so I guess a part of it also is Sam internalizing, like, holy shit, we're the same person. The only difference is that, like, your dad was perhaps a little bit worse than mine, you know, like that's you.
Which feeds into that tension between him and Dean too, because Dean, I think, really wants to really like needs at this point to differentiate between like Mac's experiences and Sam's experiences, because he is so glad to have his brother back and so desperately does not want that to be ruined by like, he can't think of Sam as a monster. He can't think of them as the same, because if he thinks of them as the same, then like his whole life and his whole like experience of raising Sam kind of starts to shatter.
Yeah.
Sam isn't as black and white of a, like, Sam's not his little innocent brother. Like, that's a big identity shift.
So in terms of the theme, right, Zeal, like this enthusiasm, this drive, and what you're talking about, I'm going to connect it back to, everyone knows the two best episodes so far, Faith and Hookman. Right, which we've analyzed. Abigail and I were on both episodes about like Hookman being about Sam experiencing religion and faith and his like own inner turmoil of good and evil, and Faith being Dean's like mirror image to that. And I think what we're seeing, right, we're seeing this zeal from Dean for protecting like the Winchester family name, you know, not per se, but like their legacy, their
the idea of them as a family
structure. Yes. Yeah. And we're seeing that contrasted with Sam's zeal for uncovering what's true, you know. And so Dean is very much in this protective, defensive, eldest sibling place of maintaining the family structures he's been handed down, and Sam is so much more interested in understanding what's actually happening there, right? And so these like conflicting passions, these conflicting zeals are what's giving that tension throughout the episode. We see things like Sam asking Dean to just trust him from the very initial, right? He has his hallucination, his prophecy, asking him to trust him, to, I need you to trust me to handle the situation with Max, to at the end, right, when, classic scene, Dean and Sam are talking about their dad, and Dean says, we have something that he didn't. And Sam's
like, oh, you mean dad? Because dad's gone. Just casual putting on the dad's jacket and being like, no, you have me. Which is such an iconic scene. And I forgot how good season 1 Dean is, because Dean in later seasons that, this wholesomeness gets, I think, really polluted. But this Dean truly believes it's just like, I'm protecting Sammy, and that's what it is, and that's my job. And, good or bad, it's great. But I think Dean Zeal in this episode is so interesting, right? Because, like, one, he's like, okay, fuck whatever is killing this thing. We need to, like, hunt it down and kill it. And then once we learn it's Max, he's like, okay, well, like, we have to take this guy out. Like, fuck therapy. Like, we killed this thing. And Sam's like, no. I want to, like, piece at it. Like, that's such a Sam thing to do.
We can talk to him. He's like, he's a human. We can talk to him.
Yeah, exactly. And Dean, and also the scene, like, where, after Max comes into the bedroom, he's ready to kill his stepmom. And Dean, like, steps in that zeal, like, protect others. And he's like, yeah, you want to kill her to go through me. Also, Dean dying, just Dean count, I guess, for, like, him dying. Congrats. Like,
again, like, we had another time where he's, like, kind of almost died in, like, 3 episodes. Like,
he's, oh man, they really like killing Dean in the show. But that
I forgot how much in the early seasons. I forgot how much in season 1 we, like, get threats of Dean's death, like, so many times.
Yes.
I forgot. Yeah, because Faith is the one where he almost dies, and then isn't the one where he is, like, trying to talk to Sam through, like, the fucking Ouija board. Not like, no, that's season 2 technically, but they still, like, he, like, kind of dies, right?
Yeah. He's in mortal danger more. I don't know. Sam gets, I think Sam
higher than Sam's.
Yeah, I think Sam gets hurt more in this season, but Dean's in, like, mortal danger more this season, at least so far.
Yeah.
Ooh, that is such an interesting, like, in terms of wump and hurt comfort pick, like Sam getting wailed on, but Dean being, like, more mortally interesting.
And usually to protect Sam, or because something to, like, you know what I mean? So, like, that idea of, like, dying for Sam over and over again and be willing to, like, put his life on the line over and over again. And also the idea that, like, Dean just, like, apparently gives zero fucks about his own safety, because this man mentally unstable, obviously, and has a gun in your face, and you're still willing to be like, you know what, I want to hand solo this situation and, like, step in front of this gun, basically, and, like, if you want it, you have to get through me.
Like, the 2 elements of zeal that I noticed from Dean the most are, like, number 1, primarily his zeal for, like, Sam. Like, he will protect Sam at all costs. That is his, like, entire world. And then B, like, his zeal for, like, saving whoever is being perceived as innocent, or saving people, and that, like, he is both those elements of zeal, like, supersede any sort of self-protectiveness he has, which, like, makes a lot of sense when we know, like, as we learn more and more about his childhood, and, like, that's pretty much been, like, drilled into him that he's the least important person in any scenario to save.
Yeah.
But it's interesting I found it really interesting how his zeal for saving people and Sam's zeal for saving people are kind of contrasted, because, like, Sam's zeal for saving people includes, like, can we get to the bottom of this? Is Max able to be saved?
Yeah.
And whereas Dean's is like, I'm not at any cost letting him hurt anyone else. Like, we need to stop this. Like, and they're both correct, but they're also, like, both, it's also sort of at odds with each other, the way that zeal sort of, even though they're on the same, they ultimately both want the same thing. They want the killings to stop, and they want the least amount of people to die.
Yeah. But also, like, Dean's zeal for family too, right? Because there was a line in this episode where he was like, oh yeah, like, we all have family issues, but we don't, like, kill each other over them, or something like
They're
that.
driving in the car, and he's like, it doesn't justify
killing your family. Yeah. And it's, like, that idea, and, like, his constant defense of, like, abusers.
Okay, hear me out. I think what's really interesting in the scene, where he steps in front of the gun, right, for the stepmother, and Sam comes in to step next to Max. I think sort of in the writing and in the cinematography of that scene, Dean is taking the place of the stepmother, whose whole thing wasn't that she was actually abusing Max, but that she did nothing to stop it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that is like really, really interestingly contrasts with Dean's whole passion.
Yeah.
Combine Zeal and Dean. You're welcome, Zine. Right. If his drive is to protect people, but he's also still standing by, right?
Yeah.
Letting John Winchester exist. But also accepting the abuse from John Winchester, right? He's internal.
Well, and because he was a literal child in that scenario.
Yeah, I want to be very clear. Accepting abuse, not as in like letting it happen as a child.
Yeah, he's not in the same position as the woman in this, who was an adult.
Right.
Not
exactly.
A child. He was a child protecting another child.
Yes. And I think him stepping in for the stepmother and narratively them being on the same side in that room, opposed to Max and Sam. I think there's a lot of interesting things going on there.
I agree. I was thinking the entire episode, like, I think Sam can relate so much to Max because he's also just like, fuck it. Like, I hate this abusive structure. Like, I want to get away from it. Like, I mean, in a sense, him going to Stanford was him trying to get away from that whole like abuse and like terror, and like he just wasn't dealing with it anymore. I mean, and so that was him kind of like fighting back essentially. Whereas didn't have that. Like, he stayed, he wanted to continue. And so he cannot relate to Max, killing people who hurt him, because in his eyes it's like, you just suck that shit up and you keep going.
He would never have considered that, like, for him leaving wasn't an option, not because it wasn't practically an option, because we are going to find out, like, through flashbacks, that there are a couple points in his childhood where he could have like been like, yeah, fuck it, I'm not staying anymore. And he doesn't. Primarily because of Sam. Like, we find out we have the flashback there's a flashback in season 9. This is not really a spoiler. There's a flashback in season 9 where he has an opportunity to stay in a boys' home, and he could have stayed there safely away from John, and the only reason he doesn't is because of Sam. And
that episode gave me such, like, I had to sit down and just like, I think I wrote an essay after I watched that episode about how much I fucking hated John Winchester.
Okay. Sorry, I want to let you finish, and then I want to segue into something related to John Winchester.
No, that's it. I just, if you ever want to do an episode where we just talk about how terrible John Winchester is, please let me know.
We'll do a meta-analysis of the whole show, their perspective on. Yeah,
that's
I like this idea.
Episodes as we all just jump in.
This is shit on
John Winchester.
Okay, so but like on that note, like the conversation near the end of this episode where they talk about like Sam, which this is a huge moment for Sam, of like Sam has been processing this whole episode, the similarities and the differences between him and Max. And I think Sam's trying to figure out like, why am I the way I am? And why did Max end up the way he, like the decisions he made based on his trauma? And Sam's like, I also made decisions based on my trauma. And Sam says to Dean, we're lucky we had Dad, a little more tequila, a little less demon hunting, and we would have had Max's childhood. All things considered, we turned out okay thanks to him, which is like hugely significant, especially considering John has still literally been evading them this whole season and didn't show up when Dean almost died, didn't show up when Sam like has just been terrible even in his absence this season. But I think like when we know what comes later, and again, this is technically a spoiler, but if you've watched the show really at all, like I don't think that, I mean, I don't even think the writers or creators knew how they were going to develop John and how much they were going to slowly give us about their childhood. So I think they actually thought John Winchester was a lot better of a father than, 15 years of revelations kind of reveals. But like,
to be fair, I don't think they ever figured out how they wanted to write Winchester.
Oh, that's true. We had Lebanon in season.
They're about to make
14.
another show about it,
Yeah,
it's
still
true.
figuring it out.
It's true. But like the fans pretty much collectively have been like, look at all this data of how bad their childhood was. And it's interesting with this, Sam goes like a little more tequila, a little less demon hunting. And I'm like, I don't think like we know there was still a lot of drinking. There was a lot of demon hunting. It wasn't actually like they weren't actually really lucky. And I wonder also at like we get a lot of the sense through a lot of flashbacks that a lot of the direct abuse that John perpetrated was directed at Dean as opposed to Sam. Like Sam experienced a lot of the like neglect pieces, I think probably more significantly. And as he got older, it turned into more of the direct stuff. But I think especially when they're younger, like we see a lot more of like John going at Dean for things. And so I like was watching Jensen's performance in that scene and being like trying to pick out of his facial expressions. Like he doesn't agree with Sam when Sam says, you know, we would have had Max's childhood. He said, you know, Dean just kind of says, you know, all things considered. He just kind of repeats that. And
okay. So I'm trying to not lean into my own headcanons, right? Because I have my own ideas about how their childhood looked.
Yeah,
and that is years of Tumblr and my own personal misgivings against John Winchester. However, from actual canon, right? Yes, John Winchester never directly put a hand on, or at least we were never shown John hitting the boys. A lot of verbal abuse can
heavily implied, though. I think I would say that the episode in season 9 heavily implies that he at least hit Dean at least the once.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, he took tough love and just forgot the love part, right? And so I think it's really interesting that Sam, who, as we learn as the show goes on, was raised by Dean, right? Like Dean is Sam's father/mother, you know, right? So like, it's hard for Sam to feel like their childhood wasn't great. And we can kind of see that based on their personalities, right? Like Sam is more kind and caring and has that capacity for like to sit down and rationalize things. And because he was raised by Dean, who he saw and caring and sweet.
Oh, I hate this so much. I hear it so badly.
But Dean, who was raised by John, does not have that. He has tough love and he has like internalized, like, I am here to help Sam. I am just a vessel for that. Any of my own emotions get in the way of that cause and figuring out who hurt my mother.
Which is John's thing too. Like John thinks of himself pretty much just as like a vessel for killing
Mary's like a demon, right? So like Dean is a reflection of John in the way that Sam is a reflection of Dean. And so that's so like Sam being like, yeah, our childhood wasn't that bad is very much him being like, you were a good parent essentially, and Dean being like, our childhood was fine, you know. Like
that's excellent analysis.
That is like gut-wrenchingly excellent analysis that I'm gonna be like
your one-off episode.
Thank you.
I think that speaks really interestingly, right? If I'm saying that Dean is juxtapositioned with the stepmom, right, and then he puts the jacket on at the end to represent John, he is literally taking the role of both parents.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't even think. I was the one who said he was stood in for the stepmom who didn't do anything. And I didn't even think about that connection back to Mary.
Yeah.
Or Dean being Sam's mother in the absence of Mary. Both of these moms looking at their sons.
Dean is okay. I'm trying to have to get into my whole like soapbox essay spiel, but like Dean is turned into Mary in a lot in John's eyes. Like if you look at a lot of the flashback series, like he is mummified so much. Like he cooks for Sam, he cleans, like he is there, like when Sam, as you know, hurt the few times it's like actually mortally wounded, the way that Dean cradles him is so mother-like.
So motherly.
So, like, you know, like in the way that John talks to Dean is very much just like, you know, that is, he really does the parentification thing, which no one, like, you know what I mean? Like in the sense that like he makes Dean a second parent, but gives him none of the rights of a second parent.
But still treats him like a child in terms of authority, in terms of autonomy, but treats him like a parent in every single responsibility. It's interesting because like I think earlier, Hannah, you or one of you said something about like, oh, Dean is like both father and mother to Sam. And it's funny because whenever I hear someone say that like Dean is like Sam's dad, I just like, I always go like, that's not quite, because it isn't, because like you said, Alicia, like it's his motherly caretaking, like his caretaking nature is all of a mom, which makes sense also, like that he has, I think, in a lot of ways modeled, like even in the flashbacks we see of Mary when Dean was like, 3 or 4 years old before she died, it's like her making food for him, it's her hugging him, it's her like very tenderly like touching him and caring for him, and like those are all the things that he like mimics in his relationship with Sam. And he doesn't like, and like we don't really see much of Dean and John's interactions. We see John carry Dean and like playfully and like talk about Sam. When we see John and Dean as a child, we see like John's interactions are still very much focused on Dean's position as Sam's brother, not on Dean's position as like his own person and his son. And that just like the way he positions Dean continues to be that, like he's primarily like a stand-in for Mary and Sam's brother.
But it's interesting too, because I don't even think that John's protection of Sam is based on like necessarily love for Sam.
No.
It's always like, okay, this is the last thing that I have of Mary. Mary loves this baby. I need to take care of this baby. I want to look at this baby though, because I suspect that by this point John must know that like Sam is technically the reason why like Mary was killed, right? So like
that's too many spoilers. We can't throw in that many spoilers.
That's okay.
Well,
I mean,
you kind of know, like you kind of
we can kind of guess based on this episode. I think that like there's a link. There's something about the children.
When he was like, Mary. My mom also died on the ceiling, but I think Sam's starting to like. That's when he has that moment of like, holy shit, this isn't like a one-off thing. Like, there's at least another human being.
That's true. He's been comparing them this whole time and talking about how they're linked, but that's the first time he realizes that is also a connection.
Not coincidence. It's not like coincidence that like this demon happened to kill Mary and he happened to be in the room. Like it's now he's going, oh, like this is exactly what happened twice. And then also even with Jess too, it kind of confirms that in a lot of ways, that it's not actually about the women that are being killed, it's actually about him.
Also, I mean, think about like if Max's dad, right, like couldn't look at Max because he was like, you got my wife killed, basically. Imagine what John must feel. But I imagine that John at least knows the demon. So I'm not gonna say like the spoilers for it, but if I imagine at this point in the show, he would know some background of the demon and what the demon was after, right? So like he must look at Sam differently, depending on when he discovered that information. Because he couldn't discover that information like when he told the boys about the demon. Like he knew about the demon for a bit when he said that. So like imagine, you look at this like child and you're like, holy shit, like not only you got my wife killed, but I still have to protect you because like you're the last thing I have of her, but I never want to look at you. So I'm going to make this older child look at you and take care of you. And just fuck off, basically.
He like abdicates his responsibility with Sam and then also actively pushes Sam away, like because Sam refuses to acquiesce to that role. Like Sam refuses to just be like whatever John wants. Like Sam is a full person, and we know that like as a child and as a teenager, Sam pushes constantly for like the truth. He pushes for like having his own life and making his own decisions, and that just like I think I think about the scene, like I think about the fact that like when Sam goes to Sanford, John says, if you go, don't bother coming back. And I think that like maybe that like based on what you're saying, maybe that's a culmination of like many years of like John doesn't know how to look at Sam, he does not know how to interact with Sam, and it's easier because Sam reminds him of everything he's lost. It's easier for him to be like, if you become a full human, if you take full autonomy of your life, like
you have to get the fuck out of here. Yeah, you can't like, and I mean, it makes sense too, because once Sam goes off to college, like John also leaves Dean alone too. Like he's like, okay, like I don't your purpose of making sure that Sam is taken care of is now like fulfilled in my eyes. Like I don't need you to do that anymore.
Yeah, the
so,
soldier's done his purpose, you know?
Yeah.
He's
so
a soldier and like the war's
like,
over.
It's like, you know, when you move out of your parents' house to go to college and your parents suddenly are having marital issues. Like what? Like there's no need, there's no you to bring them together.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's no need that he has to like give Dean purpose anymore, because you know, he's like, well, I don't know, like doesn't really, he's like, you can, which is also, you know, mirrored in the fact that he doesn't show up when Dean is in danger, even though Sam called him. He doesn't show up when they're in Lawrence and Dean calls him, because that's, he's now like single-mindedly hunting the demon.
Yeah.
And his sons are sort of collateral like his relationship with his sons is sort of collateral damage for that, because his Zeal is so focused on this one thing, and there's no one to take care. He doesn't need to be responsible for them anymore because they're not children.
Yeah, exactly. And like, and also it makes the like quote at the end, like where Dean is like, oh, you know, he didn't have me. But like, imagine if Max had a sibling, right? Like that idea that like, you know, had like an older, younger sibling, would that relationship look different? Like, would their dad have like just left them alone? What if Dean had been an only child? Like, what would have
happened?
Like, it's such an interesting question, because realistically, I think Sam, like we said, like Sam is looking at the lens from not really being raised by John, but like Dean, who was like, is probably feeling more of what Max is feeling than Sam is.
Yeah.
But doesn't have the vocabulary for that. Because like 1000% if Sam didn't exist, I think Dean would be more like Max. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like that.
Yeah. I think that whole quote that we were talking about earlier, right? Where a little less tequila, or a little more tequila, a little less hunting.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's also really interesting because Sam at the same time, like, credits their father with keeping them safe from what their father could have done.
Yeah.
Right? He's like, thank God for Dad, you know. If he drank more and hunted less, he would have been shit. So thanks, Dad.
Yeah. It's like,
wait.
You're like, ooh, that wasn't because of, that wasn't
the nice like comment that you thought that was.
Yeah, like that wasn't,
no.
There's not a good person.
That was,
he didn't like.
That was a lose-lose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm like, well, and he doesn't say, it's you know.
I am really impressed with Sam's ability to defend John, even in situations where he obviously does not want to. And that's been a thing this entire season. I feel like, now that I like remember what episodes are in it, that like Dean is the one who like, you know, will say nice things about John, be like, he's trying his best, whatever, when like Sam is shitting on him. But I think Sam is the one that actually believes it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like Dean's saying it because like he's like, all right, fuck, like I don't like, you know, when your parents are divorced and like that one parent is like, okay, I'm not gonna talk shit about your father, like that's a nice person,
gotta
like
protect the family structure.
But like, you know, Sam actually believes it.
Yeah,
but
it's like that weird flip
Sam
where
I
thought that. Yeah,
which is so interesting to me, like you wouldn't think that, but yeah, I think Dean knows, like in his heart of heart, that like John is shit, but like he's like, I can't let Sam know this. And Sam was like, yeah, our dad was like a shitty person, but he'd try his best, and like, you know, I need to give him credit for that, even if actively right now it kind of hurt.
Yeah, and Dean spent years trying, I think, to like convince Sam, and also probably convince himself that John is not as terrible as he is. And now finally it's sort of succeeding, and Dean has no idea what to do with the fact that now Sam is like, Sam is like, oh yeah, Dad actually like did his best. And Dean's like, I've been saying that for years, but also like the whole, I think there was even probably some security for Dean in the fact that Sam could see the shittiness in a way that Dean was never able to acknowledge. And I wonder about that, like, you know, in some of Dean's reactions to Sam saying these things, like he's not like relieved that Sam's finally got on board with that idea. He's just sort of resigned to the idea that like John tried his best, but he knows that his best was still really shitty.
Yeah.
And he still knows that ultimately, like, all they actually have to rely on is each other. So that kind of concludes our theme discussion and, you know, many other things. We're going to move into our going meta segment. So we talk here about some of the lore of the show, character deaths, pop culture, bunch of different categories. I'm going to run through them, Alicia. So first off, significant character deaths, any in this episode?
Yeah, none except for Dean getting shot in the head, which again, you know what, I will say that one really bugged me because in no situation can I imagine Dean with someone as much a hunting experience as he had. As someone who is not, you know, like trained in de-escalation or anything like that. Because that was a really dumb move on his part. So he kind of deserved to get shot in the situation had that actually come true. Like that would have been on him.
It's not he has way more skills than that. We know he has more skills than that. And he successfully de-escalates in other situations.
They really needed Sam to be able to come in and save him because otherwise that would not have happened.
They needed it to be urgent. They needed it to be not like he swerves and gets shot in the arm. They needed him to get like shot in the head, dead instantly. Like
there's only one option. Sam gets him and saves him, or he fails.
Yeah.
Yeah, he needed to be in mortal danger.
Wasn't real.
Welcome to it. More trauma for, well, I mean, both of them, but like more trauma for Sam. This is the second time in like 3 episodes that he has been faced with like Dean's like imminent death unless he can do something. Like he's had to save Dean twice very recently. Yeah. Next is the Bechdel test. Does this episode pass?
No. I mean, they have their one lady and they made her, you know, I would have loved to see more from the stepmom because we got nothing from her. Yeah. I don't know if we were supposed to sympathize with her. I don't know if we were supposed to be like, oh, she's the worst. Like, she was just a stand-in for Dean. And, you know, I don't know. I always assumed that Supernatural was being vaguely misogynistic, but like, it did kind of feel like they were like blaming her in a sense for not. But we don't know her own traumas regarding that. Like, if a man's like beating the shit out of his kid, like, what the fuck's he gonna do to you? And like,
exactly. Like, it's never as simple as like, it's rarely as simple in situations of like domestic violence that like, the parent that's not doing like that's not, even though she is like the stepmom, she's not like Max's biological mom. Like, she still raised him.
Yeah.
And like, it doesn't really, it's not a nuanced enough perspective to just assume that she is like didn't do anything because of malicious intent. Like I wanted to know more reasons of like why didn't she do anything? Like how can we think about her in a way that is like gives her full humanity and it doesn't really.
Yeah.
So third is our lore check. So we've talked a little bit about some of this in the theme discussion, but basically like this is like world building stuff they bring in that helps us understand like the larger context of the world they're in and things like that, and or also things that are dropped plot points or things that they reference and then they never reference again. Obviously we have abilities. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I forgot how refreshing it is for season 1 because like they don't have any time to like drop lore that much yet, right? Because they're still building all of it. So it's still time for you to be like, okay, that makes sense based on the like limited knowledge I have. And I love it so much. I have completely forgotten about Sam's powers because you know it's supernatural, but like I love it. I'm so obsessed. Like I wish that I could go back to 2005 and watch it like in real time. I'd be like, wow, this is so cool. I can't wait to see all the great things this show does with this.
Yeah, the mystery, like the mystery in season 1 of like what are Sam's powers? Like this episode, we go from like him just having nightmares to him having daytime visions to him like using his mind to move a massive thing. Like we see his powers progress so much, and it's like what I would give to like go back and be able to be like, I have no idea what's coming next.
But yeah, no, his powers are really interesting. I am curious as to because obviously the vision seemed to hurt him, and like you know, but previously it was just dreams where he would wake up and be like, ah, fuck. But now it's like he's having like, that's a Raven level visions, but they hurt him, and I'm trying to figure out if that's ever explained, like why it causes him pain. Because like when Max is using the telekinesis, like it's not like he's fine. Like he's not like grunting through that.
No, he's very clammy. He's very clammy and sweaty though. Like I wonder, he doesn't.
Yeah.
He like it's clear it's exerting a lot of energy, but yeah, it's not clear if it's painful or not.
I wasn't sure because he definitely showed up and I was like, why is this moist 45-year-old man supposed to be playing like a late teenager?
Yeah.
But I thought I couldn't tell if it was like the exhaustion of dealing with his powers or if it was a side effect of the abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I was thinking too. I thought it was just that like his mental state was deteriorating and that was supposed to be shown through his physical appearance deteriorating, not through like the telekinesis. When he was doing it, he did it like very calmly. And in fact, every time he used his powers, those were the times that he looked the most calm.
He looks the most in control at those points.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's like training that makes him like less like, oh, this is like causing physical pain, or if it's like, just the fact that Sam is just so new at this.
Yeah, and we don't know that Max ever had visions either.
Yeah, why does Sam get two? Why is he such a special boy? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm giving this from like I've never seen the show perspective, why does he get these two powers instead of Max's one? Also because Max is obviously way better at it.
I really hope some of our listeners have seen Fringe, because you haven't. Disappointing.
I haven't, no.
And this would be such a good Fringe crossover moment.
The cosmetics and Fringe.
You'd have to watch it to find out.
Oh my goodness, I don't get spoiled. This is not a Fringe podcast.
Hello, all of our listeners out there, are really dedicated fans and followers. Listen, go watch Fringe. It's worth it. Even the last season, I promise it pays off. It's pretty decent. Most satisfying season finale I've ever seen in my life.
Season finale or series?
Series finale.
Okay.
Impressive.
Right.
Impressive. That's impressive.
Yeah.
I wept. It was the most beautiful series I've ever seen.
Huh. I don't think I've ever had that.
I wept a little bit at the Supernatural finale, but that was out of sheer rage.
It was like
sheer rage.
Yeah, it was being like, I literally remember Googling that night, like, where do they live?
I told Alicia, I was like, somebody was like, what is this podcast that you do? And I was like, it's for people who got brainworms as teenagers that allowed them to understand what on earth happened November 5th, 2020.
Yeah. Okay, so the two other lore related things and like world related things I noticed are, one, they use the infrared thermal scanner with the green lasers. They never use that again. Never again.
Yeah, I was like, I've never seen this, and I don't like, they don't explain where the fuck it comes from. They're just like,
they don't even tell you really what it does. They really don't even tell you what it is. Like, why are they using that, not the EMF?
They had a little bit of extra budget in the CGI this month.
They're like, we're going to spend it on green lasers that we will never explain.
Never.
He pulled that out, and I literally lost my mind. Alicia can attest. I was like, what the fuck? I wanted to talk to the person who was like, can we strap some lasers in the show?
I love them still trying to figure out like what they're going to allow Sam and Dean to have. And they were like, we can't feasibly, like, that makes no sense for them to own this. Like, there's no way they can afford something that fucking had lasers.
Yeah, they're like,
and neither one of them are smart enough to create this. Like, we have to get rid of this. And I appreciate that.
The other thing that I noticed that, again, they're in some ways in season one, and we noticed this with a couple other things, sometimes in season one, sometimes better and sometimes worse at being like, what would realistically happen in the real world with this thing? Like, what would the police realistically do? What would, in this episode, they actually wipe down their fingerprints at the scene of a crime so that they can't get traced back to it, which like is a level of detail that I appreciated.
Yeah.
Because later on, they're just gonna like not give a fuck about covering their tracks.
And
ever.
I mean, it makes sense based on like in later seasons, it does make sense, and I kind of understand it. But I will say, before certain events in the show, whenever they're at a crime scene and they're just kind of like willy-nilly with it, I'm like, you guys are really asking to be like caught and brought in on criminal charges. Like, what the fuck?
Next we have like locations. So this episode takes place, the location is Saginaw, Michigan.
Saginaw, Michigan.
Yeah, which I think is a real place. They use a weird mix of like real and fake places in this season for some reason, unexplainable reason. And most of this is filmed in like the suburbs of Vancouver.
Yeah.
It's very like, if you've been to Vancouver, it's a very like nondescript suburb neighborhood of probably houses that are extremely expensive. Yeah. Next is like pop culture references. The only one that like there's a, references to like pop culture psychics and things like a few times. They use the aliases they use for like Father Simmons and Father Freely are members of the band Kiss. Next is Gaydar.
There was that one when they were talking to the neighbor and they were like, yeah, we're looking for this family. And he was like, why are you guys trying to like buy a house in this neighborhood? That was like supposed to be like a like you queer, then you're like, like but I think it was very interesting that they just kind of blow past it. It's like, no, like we're no.
Yeah.
Which is one of those things where I forgot how heavily they lean into people thinking that Sam and Dean are fucking in the first couple seasons. And like
they didn't shy away from it. They don't make it explicit that they are not.
They lean into it. And I now understand, not saying that I would ever become a Wednesday shipper, but I understand.
You're not allowed to come back on the show.
Because, well, here's the thing, right? If this show never has any women characters, and it's literally just Sam and Dean, and everyone cracking jokes about how they're fucking, they are always like, or just like don't care, but just brush it off and just keep going. Like, I don't think I've ever been out with a family relative near my age, had someone insinuate that we were having sex, and me not violently and viciously go no.
Exactly. Like you, and then like later on in the show they will, but they don't in these early seasons. The internet's a scary place, people, and people will come up with what they want to come up with. It was really good. They introduced a gay angel. It was really good. That was really good.
Yeah,
part.
That is. I just want
Misha Collins. Do you have a moment to speak about our Lord and Savior,
Misha Collins? The way.
The last piece of our going meta segment is international titles. Thought it'd be interesting to find out what is this episode called in other languages. In French, this episode is called Telekinesis, not Nightmare. But I actually think Nightmare is a more like interesting. Also doesn't give away key things.
On the nose, like, okay, we get it. Telekinesis happening here.
Not explained.
That kind of ruins the episode a little bit. Yeah.
So our last segment today is blessings.
I'm gonna bless Max's stepmom, which might be a controversial decision. However, I'm blessing her for all of the women who are in really shitty domestic abusive situations, who maybe had to make some really tough, terrible choices that maybe don't make them a great person either, but preservation sometimes make us do shitty things in the name of saving ourselves. So yeah, bless her.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate. I was hoping one of us would bless her because I think that is really fitting. Do you have a?
I have 2 options. I want to see who you go with.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna kind of keep with my tradition. So, and I've given my reason for this a little bit. I almost always will like resonate really hard with Dean and Dean's experiences as, an eldest child, and some of my own life experiences. That was usually where I'm going to land in terms of like my own, like who I'm going to be able to like often like pick at the brain of in an episode. And so for that reason, I, in this watch through, am really specifically trying to look at Sam, pay attention to his experiences, his perspective. And so I'm going to bless Sam again this episode. I think I appreciate Sam's just like persistent ability to see everyone as fully human and to not like boil people down to just their actions or to like put labels on people as like good or bad, but to like see them complexly and you know, and to see people as worthy of being saved and able to be saved, like with Max, like despite these really violent killings, he is not afraid of Max. Like he is compassionate towards him and he cares for him and he wants to see him be able to get through this trauma. But it's also just a really kind and generous part of his nature. And I want to bless him for having that and for maintaining that despite a lot of really shitty things happening to him.
I want to bless Dean this week. Not to take your Sam's role and then go for the other brother, but absolutely. I think our conversation about how he, like his role in the family structure and him raising Sam and taking the role of like particularly a mother did really resonate with me. If my therapist ever listens to it, thanks, Karen. You know, I think there's a lot to be said for especially how oldest siblings interact with family structures and the responsibility that they take for them and for their siblings. And that's something that's been really sticking with me recently. And so I absolutely want to bless Dean in this episode for the roles he's been put in, the roles he holds, the roles he continues to move through, and bless his like peace and self-identity.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Hannah and Alicia, for joining me today. This was like such a good conversation.
Yes. This is amazing.
So
Favorite conversation I've had recently.
Oh, anytime. Alicia, you are welcome back literally anytime. And to anyone who is listening, thank you for coming along for this wild ride. We wish you a peaceful road until we meet again. Next week, we are going to be discussing season 1, episode 15, The Benders, through the theme of imagination. A note to our listeners. This episode was recorded prior to our season 3 name change, where we went from Driver Picks the podcast to Saving People, Queering Things. For all of our new social media platforms, visit queeringthingspodcast.com.